So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to make these really simple watercolor illustrations of people in Procreate. And this is another sort of urban sketching painting technique, but this time there aren't any outlines. As usual, I'll list my brushes in the description. And just like with my other urban sketching tutorials, all this is going to be based off of photos, and this is one I pulled from Pinterest. And I'm going to start by lowering the transparency, then making a blank layer above it, and I'm just going to trace out a very firm and clear outline. And usually I'll just go around the perimeter first, and then I'll work my way through and kind of draw the interior details. And this outline isn't going to be in the final result, it's just kind of like a framework to help us paint. So you can avoid kind of troublesome small details. So for me personally, I'm going to avoid any detail on the hands or the face. And there we go, this outline looks pretty good. Next, I'll set the transparency of the reference back to 100. And then I'll use the arrow tool to shrink it down and put it off to the side, just so I can see it while I'm painting. And before I go in there and start filling out all the main colors, I like to mask off the highlights just temporarily. So to do that, I'll select a blank layer down here, below everything, even below the paper texture. And I'm just going to use any kind of random color, and then pretty much any random brush will work. And I'm just going to paint this on basically anywhere there's a highlight that's occurring on the clothing or the accessories. And this is just a temporary thing I'm going to switch off later. It's just in the next step, I'm going to fill out all the main colors. And this is just like a visual reminder to avoid putting colors in these areas. And once the masking is finished, we can finally move on and start painting this. So that'll be on a separate layer. It's really important that you don't paint on the same layer as the highlight mask. And I'm just going to go through with the medium quill brush and very, very roughly fill out all the main colors. Now, usually I can just do a long press with my finger to actually pull the color from the reference photo, but in some cases it just doesn't look quite right, and so I'll refine the color using the color picker. And obviously, do your best to avoid drawing on the highlight areas we kind of marked out in the previous step. I want to keep those pure white. And there we go. I think that fills out pretty much everything. Now it's optional, but I like to add some rosy kind of details on the face. So for that, just make a blank layer above the wash. Then you can scribble on a little bit of red around the cheeks and the ear and maybe where the nose might be. After that, I'll soften it quite a bit with the Gaussian blur. And then adjust the opacity of the layer to kind of control this effect. And once I'm happy with how it looks, I'll just merge it together with the background wash. And finally, at this point, we can move on and start adding some shading. So for that, we don't need the highlight mask anymore, this blue thing here, so we can switch those off. I'll make a blank layer above all the colored washes, and I'll set it to multiply. For the color, I like the shadows to be this kind of indigo tone, so a pretty saturated tone like this. And then for the brush, I'm going to use the water stain glazing brush. And I'm just going to go in there and basically paint this on wherever I see a shadow that sort of corresponds with what I see in the reference. But this whole style is pretty abstract, and it doesn't have to be perfect. And this shading looks pretty good, but while I was doing it, I realized I forgot to do the strap for the shoulder bag. So I'm just going to go back to the main wash layer here, and I'll add that in. And now that I'm back on track and the shadows are finished, we can move on and do the blending. So for that, we don't need the outlines anymore. That's this layer up here, so I'm just going to switch that off. And I want to make sure the main colors here and the shadows are merged together onto one layer. For the brush, I'm going to use the background water blender. And I'm basically looking for two different things to blend. So the pants here make a good example. There's basically too many kind of overlapping strokes and it looks kind of weird. So I'm just going to go in there and blend those out. And I think this area here also makes a really good example here. So this is, there's two colors kind of mixing together and overlapping. So first, I'm going to blend them. But I want to maintain this hard edge just so it keeps the definition of the actual clothing. Then down here, there's a highlight that doesn't really make sense, so I'm just going to blend that away. And then just for fun, in this area, I want there to be almost like a merging of colors or like a background effect. So I'm going to use this blender at a larger size and a very light pressure. Like I'm just going to rest it on the screen, and I'll just try to merge those colors together. And obviously all the techniques I used here, I'm gonna have to use them quite a bit on this area as well. But before I do that, I wanna show you kind of one other blending scenario you need to look out for. So in certain areas, like where the highlights kind of meet the edge of the character, it sort of screws up almost like the perimeter and it just doesn't make sense. So this shoulder is a good example. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna blend this yellow and sort of repair the silhouette. Then I'll fade it here, just on the inside, just to maintain this highlight. And then I'll use the eraser to kind of restructure the hard edge of the shoulder. And pretty much the same thing is happening on the hat as well. And I'll just go ahead and continue with these blending techniques and use them on the rest of the illustration. Now, of all the steps in this process, I think this, it might be the longest one, but I think it's worth spending some time on it. And once the blending is finished, you can go in there and add some patterns. Now, not every kind of character is going to have patterns, but I think the plaid effect on her shirt is really critical. So I'm going to show you how to add that in. So this plaid pattern has to happen on a separate layer above the background wash. And the exact colors here don't matter. We just want to create the suggestion of the pattern. So I'm just going to use this kind of reddish brown tone. For the brush, I'll use the shoulder brush, but at a really small size. And I'm first going to go through and do some kind of clusters of horizontal stripes. And then after that, I'll make another blank layer and I'll do the vertical stripes. And obviously this pattern is way too dark. So I'm just going to go into the layers panel and set both of those layers to multiply. And then I'll mess with the opacity of each one and just fine tune it. And then once you're totally happy with how the pattern looks, I recommend merging all the pattern layers and the color layers together onto one. And then lastly here, as a finishing touch, I'm going to switch off the reference image, and then I'll use the liquify tool set to push, and I'm just going to go through there and kind of refine and bounce this illustration. Sometimes the edges get a little bit lumpy, so if you use the push tool here at a small size, you can remove the lumpiness and basically refine it. And just like that, this loose, kind of abstract watercolor character is finished. And here's the final result, printed out with my Canon Pixma. And that pretty much wraps it up. If you made it to the end, let me know in the comments. Give this video a like if you think I've earned it. And here are some more quick, kind of urban sketching type tutorials I think you'll love to watch next.